Is to review with you how to use the outlining tool to prepare for your rough draft for the Crucible essay. So the first thing you need to pay attention to is that this is a full sentence outline. That means every line in the outline should have at least one sentence in response, not a single word. Okay? And the second thing is I'm using some color coding and some terms here to help explain the organization of the outline. So if you see a red highlight area, that means that you're making a point. So this would be a key idea that helps directly respond to the writing prompt for this project, one part of it. If you see blue for illustrations, an illustration is either something you're paraphrasing, something you're summarizing, or something you're quoting. So these are the factual pieces that you're using to support a point somewhere in your essay. And then if you see green for explanation, these are your interpretations. This is where you're explaining how you're connecting the point in the illustration back to the theme that you're linking to. So think of this as the how. I'm trying to show how something happened. Okay, so each section of the outline reflects a particular paragraph type in the actual essay. So in the introductory portion, the first thing you're going to want to do is answer each of these questions that I've laid out for you. Okay, so the first question is, what general background information does a reader need to know to navigate this time period and theme? So my thought on that, for example, would be that you'd have to know who the Puritans were and approximately what time period we're talking about. What would be helpful to know about the author? Look up some background information about Arthur Miller. You don't have to get real deep into research to find out some basic things. Like the whole point of him writing The Crucible was to illustrate what it was like to be a victim of a political witch hunt, because he had that as a personal experience. Whenever you've picked your theme out, you're going to write a definition for that theme, which should be included as part of your intro paragraph. And then when you get down here, what will you convey about the theme development? You want to make some sort of general statement about how themes are developed across time. So here's how I chose to do that. I said authors develop thematic arcs using combinations of narrative elements and literary devices meant to amplify the lessons characters are learning as they face external challenges and internal dilemmas. And basically all I'm doing here is trying to write a general definition for how I think themes are developed. And then I'm going to have my claim statement. And my claim statement should focus specifically on the theme that I'm going to be exploring, and then the devices that show how the author got that across. So I've done that here, and I'm highlighting for you for demonstration purposes that the points that I'm going to make in my body paragraphs are part of my claim statement to start off with. So for this example, I used logical fallacy, symbolism, and irony as my three devices that show how he developed a theme. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these three and I'm going to drop them one at a time into each of my point slots. So point one will have to have something to do with logical fallacy, and it should link back to the theme hysteria. So I get rid of my question here and I replace it with my sentence statement. So point one for me is going to be Miller's characters draw erroneous conclusions due to their tendencies towards logical fallacies, which causes them to overreact in fear. So basically, I'm just using some keywords that are synonyms to logical fallacy and a synonym phrase here to hysteria in order to set up my first point. And once I have my point set, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill all the red ones in first. So here's my other reds filled in. Here's my symbolism sentence, and here's my sentence about irony. So I'm going to drop them down and I'm going to fill them in as sentences in the point slots first. And then after that, I'm going to use my close reading note takers and my actual copies of the text to locate particular parts of the story where there's a logical fallacy at play. And I'm, as much as possible, I'm going to put these in chronological order. So the first time I notice a logical fallacy from my note takers or from the text, I'm going to paraphrase what was happening in the story there and set some context up for that logical fallacy. And my hope is to find an exact sentence spoken by one of the characters where they actually use that logic, they demonstrate that logical fallacy, or whatever my term is that I'm backing up. And then I'm going to use a green field to explain how that helps to illustrate the theme strand that I'm talking about. What's the connection back to the theme and what I was just writing about up here. And I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to find a second place somewhere in the story where a second logical fallacy is at play. And I'm going to paraphrase what was happening in that particular scene. And then I'm going to explain once again, how does that connect back to, how Arthur Miller is developing the theme of hysteria or whatever I've picked. All right, and I'm going to repeat that process, only this time I'm going to focus on symbolism. And then the next time I'm going to focus on irony. And I'll be filling these slots in as I find the information using my close reading note takers and my original text documents. When you get down to the conclusion, you don't have to have this exactly worked out or anything, but what I want you to do is do what I did. Use some questions and pretend you're answering them as specifically as you can. Use these questions as a guide to come up with some ingredients that eventually you can turn into a conclusion paragraph. So the first question you're going to ask yourself is, what have we learned about generating a theme in narrative writing as we've moved with you through your thinking? So basically what you're trying to do is, like, how does an author develop the theme? What did I learn about that question? And you're going to answer it here. And I have an example that you can look at. And then the second question you're going to think about is this. I want you to consider how understanding how a theme works might serve a broader audience. Like, what's the bigger purpose behind this kind of exploration? And I put an example of how I would answer that. So there's two questions here at the end. All I'm asking you to do is just think out how you would answer it with your current level of understanding, and then we can work on adding to it or adjusting it in the drafting phase. Okay, so the whole point of this does take some legwork, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to lay out the bones of your essay and you're going to fill in some of that connective tissue as best you can, these illustrations and these explanations. And again, you can make adjustments between here and the next phase, which is, of course, drafting. But the more effort you put into this part, the less you're going to have to do when you convert this over into a draft. So you're using your close reading note takers and the original scripts in order to find the information that you need to fill things out here. And remember, those close reading note takers are color coded. We've been using color coding to mark themes, so it's actually really easy to find, where some of these pieces of information come from. And since they're all organized by act, it makes it a lot easier to search the Google Docs of the plays in order to find the actual quotes and page numbers and things like that. So you want to use your tools to get organized at this step. Thanks for listening.